can't recommend a Honda. Having worked on a number of these jobs, number one, these proprietary fluids. Not too big of a deal because most of the fluids, such a popular brand, can be obtained at the local auto parts store. You don't have to incur the dealer price. Number two is proprietary tools. So in a number of cases, you have to have a special tool, such as changing a drive belt, to perform the task. But you could swallow that. But number three is the bolts. And this is what you shouldn't swallow, and here's why. Because if you look at this bolt, there's really four things that's wrong with it. Number one, they tuck the parts away so they're not very accessible. The bolts are not very accessible. Number two, if you look, there's not much room on the head to secure a socket onto. So you have to get your socket exactly onto this nut perfectly. There's almost no additional headroom for air. Number three, they use low-grade metals, which, as you can see, are very susceptible to rusting and subsequently stripping. So you're basically working with a bolt that's hard to get to, that doesn't have much of a head to grip onto, that's probably rusted and going to round off, and then you have to extract it. And what I would normally do is, okay, take this bolt out, measure the length, the diameter, and the pitch of the threading, and replace it with a Home Depot or a Bolt Depot bolt that is of a higher grade. The problem is, as you can see here, it's got this sleeve that extends, so you're just not going to get a replacement of this unless you go to a dealer. And obviously the problem, as you can see, is that you're going to have the same rust and rounding and low head size that you have this bolt. So in all honesty, yes, the buy-in price is cheap, or lower, I should say, and people say that's very reliable. I'm going to actually argue against that point, because this CRV in particular, this 2011 CRV, has had the AC compressor and the AC clutch go, to my recollection, out twice before 100,000 miles. I don't consider that quality a quality vehicle. So with that said, let's go ahead and replace the upper radiator hose, lower radiator hose, and the thermostat in the CRV. The reason why we're doing this is due to age and wear. So at a certain point in time, radiator hoses get more brittle, they could crack, they could leak, the thermostat could malfunction, and you don't want that to happen while you're driving on the road. So this is more of a preventative measure than anything, but obviously if that were to happen, and now you know what to do. So we're going to first start by taking out the bottom splash guard. And on a Honda, let's see if I can kind of show you this. You have these little clips, they're not actually bolts. So what you want to do with these clips is you want to take a flathead, right, like so, stick it in there, and you're just going to pull it out like that. It snaps out, and once the clip snaps out, then you can kind of wiggle it out from there, the entire piece. And there's several of them along the bottom of the splash guard. So we'll take those out first, and then we'll take a look underneath the system. This bolt here, normally 10 millimeters, comes off. There's one on either side. The problem is it doesn't come off, and so it's stuck there. It rotates within here. It caught a piece of plastic. It's just poor design. So we're gonna cut the head off the bolt. We don't need this extra bolt. We cut it off. Always use safety glasses whenever you're using a metal grinder, and we'll be done with this bolt head forever on this car. Bolt head gone, and as you see, I'll show you. This is what we had to deal with, right? This bolt came in through here, which was attached to another plastic piece. Problem is, when it rusts up, and it will, even with the splash guard, this rusts together, it seizes up, and you can't get a wrench or anything, and even if we could, it's a square piece. As you can see, it's dipped down inside there. So there's really no way to get anything in here. So you end up twisting this, and then you twist the plastic off, and this is still stuck together. You can't get this separated until we do what we did, which is just grind off the head of the bolt. Well, anyway, we have plenty of clips, as you can see around here. One bolt's not going to make a difference. So let's go ahead and continue. From the logo, go down to the left side along the, I guess the license plate area, and towards the bottom, you're gonna go up now that our splash pan is removed, and you're gonna see this white valve here, and that white valve is your petcock right here. And so we're gonna turn this, left is loose, right is tight, usually. We're gonna turn this, and then as we see the fluid coming out, we're going to put the catch pan underneath it. So, there we go, we loosen it up a little bit. Get our catch pan under here, and then we'll loosen it more until it starts to drip. And that way, when we take out our hoses, we won't have tons of fluid spurting out. So we'll let that drain out, and then we'll get to our hoses. So now is as good a time as any, while it's draining, to loosen this radiator cap. And of course, Honda doesn't make it simple for you. I'll go ahead and start from the beginning. These are the grooves on the cap, and they're roughly at 2 o'clock and I guess 8 o'clock. And they match with these two grooves here. So if you put the cap in like this, at this angle, that's how you snap it on, and then it's going to come tight. It's a little bit of a sciencey, and it'll come tight like this, basically. So starting from the beginning, knowing where the grooves are, and they don't tell you, unfortunately, we're gonna loosen, and then loosen to here, and this is the angle where you pop it off. So that'll help the draining, and the last step is we're going to fill it in here. So now we're going to start with the upper radiator hose, because that probably, we've let it drain a little bit and it's probably pretty clear, and if some of it leaks out, it's fine. You notice this is our fill area for the radiator, so we're going to pour our coolant in. There is the access for the clip. So I actually like to go from back here. I find it's a better angle, and I can clip a plier on here, squeeze the clamp, and pull that clamp back. And once the clamp is back off onto the hose, I can try and wiggle that hose off of the radiator itself. The first thing we're going to do before we try to take off the radiator hose, at least by the engine blocks, we're going to take off these battery terminals, and that'll give us a lot more room to work with. So there's our negative, and then get a positive. And stock, it is a 10mm bolt, and we just wiggle it out of the way, and that doesn't give us a lot, but it gives us a little bit of breathing room. Now in here, we can grab this clip, pull it all the way tight, and then start to wiggle it back off the hose, or down the hose, off the port. The thing that helps when you're trying to get this off the engine block port, you see all the minerals are calcifying up there. If I take this the upper radiator hose port that went to the radiator itself, and I can kind of move it back and forth, and that twists it a little bit somewhat, and then I can use the own hose to try and bring it back off. All right, so this is our new hose, this is our old hose. Looking at this car's about got 100,000 miles or so. This hose is not in bad condition. In fact, this is good, I'd say at least another 50,000 miles as is. It's a little stiffer than new. But honestly, the reason for this is because when this is not my vehicle, I tell people, you know, get the oil changed at the dealer, pay the extra money because it comes with an inspection, and then don't take anything on the inspection. Just bring the report to me, and I'll tell you some of the more painful jobs that require a lot of more heavy-duty specialized equipment. Have them do it, or an independent shop do it. But for the simpler jobs like this, we can do this ourselves. And this is one example. So this radiator refresh, if you will, is one of those jobs. So we're just going to put the old clips back, and they're both the same. And because the tougher fitting was onto the engine, we're going to do that one first. And one thing that really helps, you can already see, if you follow my finger, there's a groove, or actually I'll use my screwdriver. There's a groove that this hose will have to slip over, okay? And you want the clamp to slip over that groove here. So, and it gives you a wide amount of space with which to put your clamp on, like probably a good 1.25 inches there. But to slip it over there, whenever that situation arises, I put like a little bit of detergent inside, and any dishwashing detergent is fine. Because what will happen is it'll be slick enough to help whatever it is go onto that crusty port, but it'll quickly dry up, and then at that point you're good to go. So get it good and lubed up in there, and then we're gonna slide that bad boy right on in, and then we'll clamp it. So I already want to be kind of aware of the angle of my clamp as I'm sliding it on there. So I'll get it through here first, and then there it is. Shove that bad boy all the way in, and it's all the way into the edge there. Yeah. All right, so now I'm just gonna get my clamp on there, and I can already see that little elevation where the that lip was. I want to make sure that clamp goes over there, and we get a good solid seal. So clip it together. We are now down to a slow drip, as you can see from the petcock there. So we're gonna go ahead and close it up. Just one less thing to remember. That's pretty much all our fluid out of there. And before we take out this lower radiator hose, I'm gonna move this drain pan over. And if you look at from this angle, where if you follow the petcock to the further towards the driver's side, right there is the lower radiator hose. So I'm going to take out this clamp here and slide it up. I'm going to wiggle this guy up and out of the housing there, and some extra liquid may come out, but actually it didn't. We had it all drained, so that's good. And now the top part of the lower radiator hose is actually at the thermostat. So I'm gonna swivel around here and get that out next. For the top part of the lower radiator hose, here's the petcock. I'm kind of going straight up, but a little bit towards the passenger side, and if you follow my or if you look at my plier, there's my clip. Okay, I'm going to wiggle it off. So wiggle it off down the hose, and then we're going to separate the hose off of the thermostat. And there might be some fluid, that's why we have our catch pan underneath, but nothing came out, so that's good. Now, if you look at this hose when it comes out, right, you'll notice that the clips are rusted. So I always get new clips, and I also get new bolts because the bolts are rusted too. What we're going to do is we are going to take these handy little sockets here, and you get these at Harbor Freight or anything, and these are designed to extract, they're socket extractors. They're designed to extract these ornery or rounded off sockets. So you have to get one on here first, okay? That in and of itself is going to be a little bit of a challenge. So I've kind of got it set, but not really, because this is fairly rounded. Okay, to get this on here, I'm going to first kind of get a long nose plier and hold it in place. Socket itself, because it's going to want to fly off. And I'm going to get this hammer and try to, with whatever room I can, try to, as best I can, to tap this on there. Okay, good. I'm going to hold it in place. I'm going to get right under it because there's just no room for air here. And I'm going to see if I can get that bolt out. And this is actually going to be the easiest of the three angle-wise. And it looks like it's coming out. The next two bolts are going to be even tougher to access. So I'm going to loosen it up. I just don't want to be, if I can access it, be fighting with a seized bolt. So I'm going to use some PV Blaster or any other sort of penetrating lubricant and squirt it right in there. And I squirt it very generously and liberally to make sure it gets all in. And this stuff really stinks, and it'll give you a headache. So just be careful when you're squirting it on in there. Now, the other bolt, you have to probably get it from the top, and of course it's not that visible. So we're going to try. When you're doing any kind of this work with penetrating lubricant underneath the car where stuff can fall down, always wear safety goggles. While we're waiting for the penetrating lubricant to do its job, I always buy new clamps too, because as you can see, these clamps are all rusted. Now these you could probably get a little bit more mileage out of, but we already got them. They're not that expensive, so we're gonna go ahead and change them out for fresh clamps. This one is pretty rusted out. Top ones typically don't rust as much, and I know you got the splash guard on the bottom that's supposed to help prevent water and stuff from getting, but it's going to get in there. So we'll go ahead and get these new clamps all set up for our lower radiator hose. You'll notice with the loosening of the second bolt, there's going to be more coolant coming out. That's fine, just as long as you get your catch pan underneath. You're not going to get to it from the top. I know people show videos from the top. It's not going to happen. So lots of penetrating oil. Now that you can see the bolt over there, if you follow the end of this stubby extension for the ratchet, you get into the bolt, And this is much easier if you go at it from the passenger side as opposed to the driver's side. The other two are easier from the driver's side. And once you're in here, you've let the penetrating oil sit for at least an hour, and you've secured the extracting socket onto here, and now we can gradually start to get this loose. All right, we're going to go ahead and replace the old thermostat with a new thermostat. And if you notice, per my intro, the bolt is even rusted in the threading. And so that's part of the reason why it's hard to turn out, because it's slightly seized up. So one thing we want to do with our new bolts, and you must do this, you're going to have to take a break, which as you see we did, judging by the daylight, before you put in your new bolt. We had to go get some anti-seize because we didn't have it here handy. And you want to put a thin coating of anti-seize on the new bolt so that it doesn't seize up when you try to take it out the next time. And that will help you tremendously, because now it's hard enough to get the wrench onto the head, but what you don't want to have to happen is the bolt is seized up, and you have to, the less force you have to apply to get rid of it, the better. On a side note, now that we're in the daytime here, lemon and mint candle, this is really good for warding off mosquitoes, because one thing when you're working outdoors is you don't have these pesky mosquitoes constantly in your area of operation. So the new thermostat will go in like this, with this square piece where the electrical connector is going to rest this way. So let's go ahead and put her back in. And so petcock is here right in the center. Thermostat is slightly towards the passenger side. Put this bolt down for a second. And up in here, if you give me the camera. So up here, this is our electrical connector. So we're going to put this with the square straight up and just pop it into the housing and set up the nuts like so. And if you want to kind of hold it in place, now is actually a good time to put the electrical connector back into the square. Go ahead and do that. Pop it in there now. All right, so with our electrical connector, that little blue doohickey there, popped back into the square, I'm gonna go ahead and put in this first screw. I'm gonna tighten it too much. I just want to hold it in place, you know. We got our bottom two bolts in by hand. This one didn't go that far. I'm trying to minimize the amount of contact that the socket has to make on the bolt, because as you know, the bolts are cheap. So while we're down here, you can see there's like a lot of rusted areas. So I'm gonna hit it with some of this rust reformer, like down here. Especially a lot of the bolts past that left side, and just to the left of the square bracket where we already put our electrical connector back in. So that is the bolt that we are trying to hand tighten right now. So I hand tight them all in there. All right, now the next step I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use two hands whenever I can with a dry latex glove and get it hand tight, because I'm feeling this socket on here. And so this is as tight, it's butting right against there, right? And so it's tight as it possibly can get without the socket. Now I am going to have to ratchet it a little bit because there's no load bearing on this bolt, but there is pressure on this bolt. There is coolant pressure on this bolt. So I'm going to tighten it because I don't want to have a big coolant leak out of here. Got it as tight as we can do it by hand, and now I'm going to have to ratchet it. But as soon as I feel a little bit of resistance, I'm going to go just beyond a little bit of resistance, and then I'm going to stop. And I'm actually going to do this with two hands just to be extra cautious. Bolt, if you can see that in here, right? And again, you use a deep socket for that, just like the other two. And with this deep socket, I'm holding the socket in place here, and I'm gently twisting on this. When I start feeling some resistance, I'm going a little bit beyond there just to get it snug, not super tight. All right, and there shouldn't be any coolant dripping, because now to put this back in, take just a little smidgen of detergent on the inside here, so it slides in better, and that detergent will dry up pretty fast. So there's a limited shelf life of time that you have to slip this on, and we're going to do both sides at once actually. And so let's hurry up and get the other side on here as well. Oops.
Get eyes on.
Mm-hmm. And so I got this in here, this in here. That's it's pretty smooth. So the way this goes in, this is the lower radiator hose, and the larger and the 90-degree bend versus I guess the 30-degree bend or whatever goes in the top. This is going to go onto your thermostat. So we're going to put this in first, up high, and because my glove's a little slippery, I'm going to actually take this off. Both clamps are on already, and so once we get it up in here, so now the lower part, you can do either one first, but the thermostat's a little more solid, so I'd rather have the lower part go on first because I can put two hands on here. So I'm going to actually, again, point of reference, here's the petcock towards the driver's side. Up over on this housing is where the lower part of the lower radiator hose is going to go onto, but I'm going to drop the camera for a second because I want to put one hand here and one hand here as I fit it, the hose onto the housing. So this housing, I put the hose onto this housing all the way to the end, and all I did was I slid the clamp down. I'll release it in a second. And now for the thermostat part, I should like to get it up here a little bit. For the thermostat part, which is the top part of the lower radiator hose, which is here, this thermostat is on there pretty solid. It's bolted on, so I'm just going to do this by hand. Fit it on here, and then just slide that bad boy on there. Just going to pinch it right about there. And there we go. And let it release like so. And so now, so we're going to refill the coolant, and the Honda CR-V takes about 1.5 gallons. I think it's like 6.2 quarts or whatever, but I like using the same funnel for the same type of fluid. So I just mark it coolant so that for future reference, when I'm doing a job like this, I can just make sure I have the right fluid in there. And then we're just gonna fill up the radiator with the coolant. And turn it horizontally. That caps that off. Let's go ahead and reconnect our negative battery terminal. Probably didn't need to disconnect it, but as a measure of good practice, anytime we do any car related maintenance, it's a good idea to disconnect the negative battery terminal so that there is no live electricity in the system. Let's go ahead and snap that back on. And that is how you replace the upper radiator hose, the lower radiator hose, and the thermostat on a 2011 Honda CR-V. Wish I could say it was easy, but it's not. So this is a moderate level of difficulty, a high level of patience. Thanks for watching.